All right. Well, good morning. Good morning, everybody. So, years ago, I read a quote. I think I mentioned part of the quote earlier. I read a quote that has stayed with me for so long. I've repeated it so often from a Buddhist monk, Ajahn Chah. He was the teacher of Jack Kornfield. And he said, do everything with a mind that lets go. Do everything with a mind that lets go. If you let go a little, you will have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you will have a lot of peace. And if you let go completely, you will have complete peace. And that is a worthy thing to remember. And it really is the key to being free from suffering. You know why we suffer? We suffer because we want things to be other than the way they are. Think about it. We want things to be other than the way they are, and that's why we suffer. But what if we didn't fight with what is? And what if we were able to live in a state of spiritual surrender and just a state of non-resistance? If we could do that, we would not lose our peace. You know, I was going to speak today about Earth Day coming up next week. I think it's next Thursday. And instead, Spirit wrote this talk on surrender and non resistance. And so I chose not to resist. But being that it is Earth Day this week, I do want to give you an update on the environmental work that I've been involved in, trying to save those big, beautiful, healthy trees out at Lake Siskiyou here. You might say, hey, Rev, you know, you're talking about non-resistance, but weren't you resisting those loggers, right? Those loggers out there wanting to mow down that beautiful forest at Lake Siskiyou. And I would respond that living in a state of non-resistance doesn't make us a passive doormat. You know, we're not passive in life. We're active. We live to do good works. And we know that faith without works is dead, right? So when I saw all those blue rings painted around those big healthy trees marked for cutting, I had to make a loud noise, and I kept making a loud noise, and many folks joined in. And as of a few days ago, when I finally had the courage to walk the area that's being logged, I was so surprised and I was so thrilled to see that the trees that I'd hoped to save were still standing. And all I could do was just put my hands in prayer position and just keep saying, thank you, Great Spirit. Thank you so much. I just felt so much incredible gratitude that that was the outcome. But there's a quote from the Bhagavad Gita about actions and how we take actions and yet have non-resistance. In this quote, Lord Krishna says, "Let your concern be with action alone, and never with the fruits of action. Do not let the results of action be your motive, and do not be attached to inaction." That scripture is something I have studied and I have worked to embody so much in my life, because it's asking us to act with the highest consciousness and not be attached to the results. And that is so much easier said than done, right? But, you know, the truth is that to be able to stay at peace, you know, I had to concern myself regarding the trees. I had to concern myself with taking the action, all the actions I could take to save those trees. And then after that, I had to let go. I had to surrender to God's will. And, you know, I did what I could, and I had to accept whatever came of it. After writing letters and making calls and riling up the community, I had to find that place of letting go and resting in the peace of non-resistance. And so if we want daily peace, we'll need to practice daily letting go. And sometimes it's hourly, and sometimes it's required minute to minute even. In Isaiah chapter 64, verse 8, we read, "But now, O Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay, and you our potter, and all of us are the work of your hand." To surrender to Spirit, we say, I am the clay. I am the clay, and you, Great Spirit, are the potter. Live this life. Let the me dissolve into thee. So it is just thy life. It is just thy life. And we read the same thing in Psalm 48. Not my will, but yours be done. In other words, I am your instrument. I serve you and I let go of the fruits of actions. It is hard though. It is hard to not be attached, like for instance trying to save a forest. It's hard to not be attached to the fruits of our actions. But life is about letting go and letting life be as it is, even while we do our best to bless the world. There's a story that Eckhart Tolle tells about the great Indian philosopher J. Krishnamurti. And J. Krishnamurti traveled all over the world for over 50 years and gave talks and satsangs. And one day in one of his talks later in his life, he surprises his audience by saying, "Do you want to know my secret?" And of course, everyone perked up. Oh, we're going to get a secret finally. And they were on the edge of their seats. They'd been coming for 30 years and they just hadn't quite gotten the essence of his teaching. And so he says, "This is my secret. I don't mind what happens. I don't mind what happens." That is spiritual freedom, you know. And, Krishnamurti had very helpful wisdom to share. He was very awake and very wise. And so he traveled most of his life sharing it, right? But he wasn't attached to whether you got it or not. He allowed life to be what it was. He wasn't attached, so he wasn't reactive, so he was at peace. Not minding what happens, though, it doesn't mean we just do nothing and that we just don't make any effort to help others. It means that what we do without attachment, and we don't resist what is and what the response is, what the reaction is. So we do make effort to help others and to save the environment, to stand for justice, to help the marginalized, to stand against racism, to have healthy boundaries also in our relationships. We do our dharma, we live our most loving, conscious, and best life. But we learn to relax and let thy will be done through us instead of thinking we're in control and that we have to stay in control and that we have to control others and we have to control everything. A lot of having a hard time getting to non-resistance is because we want to be in control and we think we are. So that's where surrender comes in. That's where non-resistance comes in. Eckhart Tolle, he says, non-resistance is the key to the greatest power in the universe. And that through it, through non-resistance, consciousness, which is spirit, is freed from its imprisonment in form. When we have this inner non-resistance to form, to whatever is or whatever happens, he says that's a denial of the absolute reality of form. And there's a lot packed into that sentence, that it's a denial of the absolute reality of form. Because when we're fully in the ego, we are believing in the absolute reality of form. We're very much in the world, and we're very much of the world, right? When we're in the ego, we're giving form the absolute reality. We're believing it's the absolute reality, and there's no awareness. There's no there's just identification with the personal self and all its opinions and all its judgments. But with an inner not resisting life, we bring in awareness. We bring in spaciousness. This is why we do our spiritual practices. We bring in consciousness, and then we get to where Jesus was describing his state. I'm in this world, not of it. I have overcome this world. I have overcome believing in form. I have overcome living from the ego, right? And so when you can bring in consciousness and bring spaciousness to all those feelings and all those opinions and all those judgments, you can let go. The spaciousness allows dissolution, right? You're just resting then in isness. You're just resting in peaceful beingness, right? And then if there was an ego a minute ago that had a grudge or a problem, you become free. The consciousness sets you free. The truth sets you free. So spiritual surrender It basically means just being in an utter state of letting go and trusting God, of letting go and trusting life, which is trusting God because God informs all life. So I have another story about a spiritual master that lived in a state of utter surrender to the divine. He lived in a state of non resistance to what life brought every day. So there was a Zen master, and his name was Hakuin, and he lived in a town in Japan. And he was held in very high regard by the people, and people came to him for spiritual teaching regularly. But then it happened that a teenage daughter of his next door neighbor became pregnant. And when being questioned by her and being scolded by her parents, when they were asking of the identity of the father, she told them it was Hakuin, the Zen master, guy next door. And so, with great anger, the parents rushed over to Hakuin and told him, with much shouting and accusing, that their daughter had confessed that he was the father. And all he replied was, "Is that so? Is that so?" The news of the scandal spread throughout the town and beyond, and the master lost his reputation. But this didn't trouble him. Nobody came to see him anymore. But he remained unmoved. And when the child was born, the parents brought the baby to Hakuin. "You are the father, so you look after him." The master took the loving child and took just loving care of this child. And a year later, finally, the mother remorsefully confessed to her parents that the real father was the young man who worked at the butcher shop down the street. So, in great distress, they went to see him, to see Hakuin, to apologize and to ask for forgiveness. "We are really, really sorry. We have come to take the baby back. Our daughter confessed that you're not the father." "Is that so?" is all he would say as he handed the baby over to them. So the master responds to falsehoods and truth, to bad news and good news in exactly the same way. Is that so? Is that so? Hmm. He allows the form of the moment, whether it's good or it's bad, to just be as it is. And he doesn't become a participant in human drama. To him, there's only this moment right now, and this moment is as it is. And for him, events aren't personalized. He's nobody's victim. He's so completely at one with what happens that what happens has no power over him anymore. I love this story. I want to be Hakuin. I want that mastery. Because, we can see that when we do resist what happens, we're at the mercy of what happens because the changing world will control us. The changing world will determine whether we're happy or unhappy. We see a lot of people that live like this. Something in their day goes wrong and they lose their peace and they never get it back for the rest of the day. Or maybe they never get it back for a week or a month, right? Because they don't know how to let go. They don't know how to stop resisting what is, right? So it takes the consciousness of non resistance and non attachment and equanimity to truly be more free of the changing outer conditions of the world. And maybe, we haven't practiced as long or as hard as that Zen master. But if we're growing, then even if we do find ourselves in resistance to what is, and we probably will, then we're able to let go sooner. We're able to let go sooner. It's all about letting go again and again. And, we're able to see we've been stuck being angry, or we've been stuck blaming, or we've been stuck feeling like we're the victim. And we decide we want to let go so we can have peace again. Mickey Singer, he used to always say, get to where stuff just passes right through you. I think about that all the time. I mean, he's been saying that to me since I was 15 years old. Get to where stuff just passes right through you, right? It doesn't get stuck in you. You don't have a problem with it. You just don't have a problem with it. Your heart is open. It stays clear. And there isn't the scar tissue in there where stuff got stuck and more stuff got stuck and more stuff got stuck until it's just this big blockage there, right? And then any little thing just sets off all that suffering that's stuck there in the heart. So we can live open. We can live surrendered, where there's a lot of spaciousness and peace inside. And we're just right here in the present moment, and we're not holding on to the past. We're not holding on to blame. And we aren't in the future worried about things, if they're going to turn out. We're just here. We're just breathing in. We're relaxed. We're breathing out. We're open, and we're meeting life on life's terms. I know this person. I have this person in my extended family who they just seem like they cannot stand the present moment. Eckhart Tolle talks about that. He talks about you got to make peace for the present moment. Some people just battle the present moment. They can't stand to be in the present moment. And this person, it seems like they don't have any idea how to be, right here, right now. And when I talk with them, there's always different versions of the same story that they tell. And the story they tell goes something like this. There's something that needs to happen in my life before I can be at peace and be happy. And I resent that it hasn't happened yet, and maybe my ranting and resentment will finally make it happen. Have you heard that story, you guys? Have you ever told that story? You know anybody like that? There's just always a reason they can't be happy. There's always reason. And like with this person, I always try to point out at least a reason or two for happiness or for gratitude, but they have a vehement argument for every every point I try to make, about no, that's not a reason to be happy, right? So Eckhart Tolle says it's the ego that creates this constant background unhappiness, because the ego holds on to negativity and anger and hatred and being fed up. And behind this kind of chronic unhappiness, there are three basic unconscious attitudes. And he describes them. See if these sound familiar. These three main attitudes that keep us unhappy. The first one, something happened in the past that should not have happened, and I resent it. And if that hadn't happened, I'd be at peace now. Something happened in the past, shouldn't have happened. I can't be at peace now. Okay. I think, we all have felt this way probably many, many, many times. We all can get stuck in this train of thought, where it's hard to let go of a conflict, or it's hard to forgive. And the ego wants to keep blaming and keep blame going. And forgiveness takes time. But if we're willing, it's for us. Forgiveness sets us free, right? And letting go sets us free. The second attitude he talks about, this attitude of unhappiness, is something is happening right now that should not be happening, and it's preventing me from being at peace now. This one ties right into what resistance is. Say what's happening now is that you have a migraine. So you have a migraine, but you add to your misery by resisting it, by fighting, by being upset about it, by telling yourself a story that it's ruining your day and it's ruining your life, and you're frustrated. So you can go that route, which just makes you more unhappy. Or you can take some Tylenol, lie down, dim the lights, put on some very soft music, and surrender to what is. I sometimes get migraines, and I've learned a long time ago, just surrender. Don't argue with the migraine. You won't win. The third attitude that Tolle talks about is the one I mentioned earlier about my extended family member. And this is the attitude that there's something that needs to happen in my life before I can be happy and be at peace. And this can be so many things. Something needs to happen before I can be at peace. We have to come out of the pandemic before I can be at peace, or I have to find my soulmate before I can be at peace, or there's just so many things that we think, until that happens, we can't be at peace. We can't be happy. We convince ourselves we won't be happy unless that happens. And that just sets us up to suffer. That sets us up to be dependent on outer conditions, which are always going to change and inevitably disappoint us. So the teaching is learn to see how we tell a story of why we can't be happy now, and decide we're tired of that story, and actually we can be happy now. We can be happy now by making peace with this present moment now. Stay here, stay now, stay present. Because this moment is perfectly fine, right? Nothing is wrong here. We're not about to be eaten by a tiger, you know. We're together with friends, you know. We're expanding our mind, we're opening our heart. There is nothing wrong. So we make peace with now and we stay now, we stay present. And we do that every day. And that's what it is to learn to live in non resistance. It has a lot to do with staying present. You know, make peace with the present moment and live life on life's terms. So ask yourself often, what is my inner state? Am I feeling peace or am I telling myself some kind of unhappiness story? If there's any kind of negativity in me, you know, maybe I can stop telling that story that's keeping me in some unhappiness. Doesn't mean we spiritual bypass our emotions, but we, you know, we do want to honor our feelings, but we also want to realize we are consciousness and get some distance from feelings and from thoughts and not be lost in them. Surround them with spacious beingness. You know, some of my meditation retreats that I've done, I would take people on, I'd tell them to bring a raft and I'd take them up to my favorite highland lake, Cliff Lake. And we'd blow up our rafts and, you know, we'd all get on our rafts and we'd have like 2 minutes to giggle and laugh. And then we'd go into silence. Of course, I'd have them wear sunscreen. Some of them would bring a shawl so they could kind of cover. But I'd have them just float on their raft on this lake. It was small enough they weren't going to float off into, you know, Never Land. But I'd ask them to just relax and surrender. Just let the wind and the water just take them where it will. And just really experience that feeling of letting go, just not being in control, just I let go, I surrender. And it really was one of the most beautiful exercises I've done in retreat because I saw everyone feeling so much peace. And they to this day, people write me and they talk about that experience of floating, just letting go completely. It's such a simple thing. But I suggest, you know, that you find a way to experience palpable surrender. Maybe it's a massage, but become masterful at letting go. Massage is a great way. You know, I'm so consciously present when I get a massage and I just keep letting go and I just can't even believe how much tension was in my body because I'm so transformed afterwards. So find a way to let go more regularly, you know. This is how we live wide open to spirit. So in closing, may we all live allowing thy will to be done. Letting go and letting God, being present and being happy with life as it is, as it is. May you and may all beings be happy and be at peace. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kathy.